They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when your own sister steals the love of your life right from under your nose? What happens when she thinks she's won the ultimate prize, only to discover she's been playing a game she never understood? This is the story of how I watched my world crumble, rebuilt it from nothing, and discovered that sometimes the biggest betrayals lead to the most unexpected victories. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I still remember the exact moment my life changed forever. It was a Tuesday afternoon in downtown Portland, and I was sitting in my beat-up Honda Civic outside the small accounting firm where I worked as a junior associate. The rain was drumming against my windshield, and I was scrolling through my phone, trying to work up the courage to call Rebecca. Rebecca Martinez had been my girlfriend for 3 years. We met in college at Oregon State, where I was studying business and she was pursuing her marketing degree. She was everything I thought I wanted: ambitious, beautiful, with this infectious laugh that could light up any room. We'd been talking about moving in together, maybe even getting engaged after I got my promotion at Henderson & Associates. But there has been something different about her lately. She'd been distant, taking longer to respond to my texts, always seeming distracted when we were together. I kept telling myself it was just stress from her new job at the boutique marketing agency downtown. I was making excuses because I couldn't bear to face what I suspected was really happening. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Can we talk tonight? Something important I need to tell you." My stomach dropped. Those words never meant anything good. That evening, I drove to her apartment complex on the east side of town. She lived in one of those modern buildings, with exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than she could reasonably afford on a marketing coordinator's salary. I'd always wondered how she managed it, but Rebecca was good at deflecting those kinds of questions. She opened the door wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, and she had that look, the one people get when they've already made a decision and are just going through the motions of explaining it. "Marcus," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "come in." Her apartment felt different somehow, colder. The photos of us from various trips and events were gone from the mantelpiece. In their place were new candles, a vase of expensive-looking flowers, and what appeared to be a men's watch that definitely wasn't mine. "Rebecca, what's going on?" I asked, though part of me already knew. She took a deep breath and turned to face me. "Marcus, we need to break up?" The words hit me like a physical blow, but I managed to keep my voice steady. "Why? What happened? If this is about the promotion taking longer than expected, I can explain." "It's not about money," she interrupted, then paused. "Well, not entirely." "Then what?" She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. "I've been seeing someone else." The room seemed to tilt. "For how long?" 2 months. 2 months. While I'd been working late, trying to impress my boss, trying to build a future for us, she'd been building a future with someone else. "Who?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something that looked almost like guilt in her eyes. "Marcus, I'm sorry, I never meant for it to happen this way." "Who, Rebecca?" "Your sister." The words didn't make sense at first. I stared at her, waiting for clarification, for her to correct herself, for this to somehow be a misunderstanding. "My sister? Vanessa? What does she have to do with—" And then it hit me. "No." Rebecca nodded slowly. We've been together for 2 months now." I felt like I was falling through the floor. Vanessa. My older sister is 3 years old, the sister who had always been the golden child, the one who got everything she wanted, the one who never seemed to struggle for anything in life, the sister who knew exactly how much Rebecca meant to me. "You're telling me you're leaving me for my sister?" I couldn't believe the words coming out of my mouth. "Marcus, please try to understand. What Vanessa and I have, it's different. She gets me in ways that—" "Gets you in ways that I don't?" I finished. "Rebecca, I've been with you for 3 years. I thought we were building something together." "We were young when we started dating," she said, her voice gaining confidence now that the secret was out. "People change. People grow. What I need now, what I want from life, Vanessa can give me that." I thought about my sister. Vanessa Thompson had always been the successful one in our family. While I was grinding through community college and working part-time jobs, She'd somehow landed a position at a high-end real estate firm in the Pearl District. She drove a BMW, lived in a penthouse apartment, and seemed to effortlessly navigate the world of Portland's social elite. Our parents adored her success, often using her accomplishments as a gentle reminder of where I was falling short. "What exactly can Vanessa give you that I can't?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. Rebecca's expression softened slightly, but there was something else there now, something that looked almost like pity. "Marcus, you're a good guy, you really are. But Vanessa, she's going places. She has connections, opportunities. She can offer me the kind of life I want." "You mean she has money?" "It's not just about money," Rebecca said quickly, but we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "It's about ambition, about reaching for something bigger than me." She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I stood there in her apartment, looking at this woman I'd planned to propose to, this woman I'd been imagining a future with, and realized I didn't know her at all. Or maybe I did know her, and I'd just been too blinded by love to see what was right in front of me. "When did this start?" I asked. "When did you and Vanessa?" "That night at her housewarming party. You remember, you had to work late because of the Morrison account. Vanessa and I got to talking, and we realized we had so much in common. One thing led to another." I remembered that night. I'd felt terrible about missing Vanessa's party, especially since she'd been so excited about finally having people over to see her new place. I'd promised Rebecca I'd make it up to both of them. Instead, I'd apparently given them the perfect opportunity to start their affair. So while I was working, trying to build a career, trying to build something for us, you two were. It wasn't planned, Marcus. These things just happen sometimes. I wanted to argue, to fight for what we'd had, to remind her of all the good times, all the plans we'd made. But looking at her now, seeing the way she'd already moved on, the way she was looking at me like I was an obstacle to be dealt with, rather than someone she'd once claimed to love, I realized there was no point. "I should go," I said. She nodded. "I think that's best." As I walked toward the door, she called my name. "Marcus?" I turned back. "I hope you understand that this doesn't change anything between you and Vanessa. She's still your sister." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Right. Of course. "And I hope we can all be mature about this. Maybe in time we can all be friends again." This time I did laugh, a bitter sound that surprised both of us. "Friends. Sure, Rebecca, why not?" Quote, I left her apartment and sat in my car for nearly an hour, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. My girlfriend of 3 years had left me for my sister. My sister, who had always gotten everything she wanted, had now taken the one thing that mattered most to me. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal itself. The worst part was the look in Rebecca's eyes, that mixture of pity and relief, as if she were finally trading up from some disappointing compromise to the real prize. As I drove home through the Portland drizzle, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for Rebecca. I wasn't going to plead with Vanessa. I wasn't going to make a scene or try to break them up. Instead, I was going to do something I'd never done before in my life. I was going to focus entirely on myself. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. What I didn't know then was that this decision would change everything. What I didn't know was that while my sister thought she'd won the ultimate prize, she had no idea about the phone call I'd received just 3 days earlier. A phone call I hadn't even mentioned to Rebecca, because I wasn't sure I believed it myself. But that's a story for another part of this tale. For now, all I knew was that my old life was over, and whatever came next, I'd be facing it alone. 3 days after Rebecca destroyed my world, I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment, staring at a business card that had arrived with a certified letter. The card was thick, expensive-looking paper with embossed gold lettering, Whitmore, Blackstone and Associates, Estate Law. The phone call that had come with it still felt surreal. "Mr. Thompson? This is Harold Whitmore. I represent the estate of your late grandfather, Edmund Carver." Edmund Carver. I'd heard the name maybe twice in my entire life. My mother had mentioned him once during a heated argument with my father, calling him a, quote, stubborn old fool who cut us off. That was 15 years ago. I'd always assumed he was just some distant relative who died poor and bitter. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore, but I think you have the wrong person. My grandfather died when I was 5. His name was Robert Thompson. No, Mr. Thompson. Edmund Carver was your maternal grandfather, your mother's father. And according to his will, you are his primary beneficiary. The conversation had lasted 20 minutes, but I barely remembered the details. Something about a fortune in tech investments, real estate holdings, and a company I'd never heard of. Whitmore had insisted on meeting in person to discuss the quote-quote complex nature of the inheritance. Now holding his card, I wondered if this was some elaborate scam. People didn't just inherit fortunes from grandfathers they'd never met. Things like that happened in movies, not to junior accountants in Portland who couldn't even keep their girlfriends from running off with their sisters. But the letterhead looked legitimate, and when I'd Googled the law firm, they were real, one of the most prestigious estate law practices in Seattle. The kind of firm that didn't waste time on small-time scams. I made the call. Mr. Thompson, I'm so glad you reached out. Whitmore's voice was warm, professional. When can you come to Seattle? This really needs to be discussed in person. What exactly are we talking about here? In rough numbers. There was a pause. Mr. Thompson, your grandfather's estate is valued at approximately $2.3 billion. I nearly dropped the phone. The drive to Seattle 2 days later felt like traveling to another world. I'd taken a personal day from Henderson and Associates telling them I had a family emergency, which, in a way, was true. Whitmore, Blackstone, and Associates occupied 3 floors of a gleaming downtown high-rise. The reception area had marble floors, original artwork, and furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary. I felt completely out of place in my off-the-rack suit and scuffed shoes. Harold Whitmore was exactly what I'd expected. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from decades of handling other people's enormous wealth. His office overlooked Elliott Bay, and I tried not to gawk at the view while he pulled out a thick folder. Your grandfather was a remarkable man, Marcus. May I call you Marcus? I nodded, still trying to process being in this room, having this conversation. Edmund Carver started with nothing. Absolutely nothing. He grew up in rural Oregon, dropped out of high school, and spent his 20s working logging camps and fishing boats. But he had something rare. He could see opportunities where others saw only problems. Whitmore opened the folder and slid a black and white photograph across the desk. It showed a tall, lean man in his 30s, standing in front of what looked like a small warehouse. He had my mother's eyes. In 1962, Edmund used his life savings, about $3,000, to buy a failing electronics repair shop in Portland. This was just as the computer industry was beginning to emerge. Instead of just fixing radios and televisions, he started experimenting with early computer components. I studied photography. This man was my grandfather, but I'd never seen him before in my life. By 1975, he'd pivoted entirely to computer hardware. By 1980, he was manufacturing components for companies that would later become tech giants. Apple, Microsoft, Intel, they were all clients at various points. But why didn't I know any of this, I asked. Why didn't my mother ever mention that her father was successful? Whitmore's expression grew somber. Because Edmund and your mother had a falling out in 1985, shortly after you were born. A very serious falling out. He pulled out another document, a letter written in careful handwriting. Your mother wanted Edmund to invest in your father's various business ventures. Your father had, let's call them ambitious ideas, but poor execution. Edmund refused, believing the investments were too risky. When your mother persisted, threatening to cut off contact with his only grandchildren if he didn't help, Edmund made a choice that haunted him for the rest of his life. He cut us off instead. He did. But Marcus, he never stopped following your lives. He had investigators provide him with annual reports. He knew about your grades, your college graduation, your job at Henderson and Associates. He knew about Vanessa's real estate career. He knew everything. I felt a chill. He was watching us. He was protecting his investment, Whitmore said gently. You see, Edmund always intended to leave his fortune to his grandchildren. But he wanted to be sure you'd become the kind of people who could handle it responsibly. The kind of people who wouldn't waste it on get-rich-quick schemes like your father's ventures. He slid another document across the desk, a copy of Edmund's will. The inheritance was structured very specifically. Upon his death, which occurred 6 months ago, his estate would be held in trust until his grandchildren reached certain milestones. For you, that milestone was your 28th birthday, which you reached 3 weeks ago. I stared at the will, trying to focus on the legal language, but the numbers kept jumping out at me. Millions here, millions there, holdings in companies I recognized, real estate portfolios across 3 states. What about Vanessa? I asked. Whitmore's expression became carefully neutral. Your sister's inheritance is more complicated. Edmund's investigators provided him with detailed reports about both of your characters. Your financial responsibility, work ethic, how you treated others. These reports influenced the final structure of his will. What do you mean? Edmund left specific instructions. Your sister will receive her inheritance only after demonstrating what he called genuine character development, for a period of no less than 5 years. The trustees have full discretion to determine when and if that standard has been met. I felt a strange mix of emotions: vindication, guilt, confusion. So I inherit immediately, but Vanessa has to wait? That's correct. Based on his investigators' reports, Edmund concluded that you had already demonstrated the qualities he valued: integrity, hard work, genuine care for others. Your sister's reports were less favorable. I thought about Vanessa's lifestyle, her BMW, her penthouse apartment, her ability to network her way into any social circle. What did the investigators say about her? Whitmore hesitated. Perhaps it's better to focus on your own inheritance for now. There are many decisions to be made, and the transition process is quite complex. But I pressed him. Mr. Whitmore, I need to understand this. What exactly did your grandfather think was wrong with my sister? He sighed and pulled out another file. The reports documented a pattern of behavior that concerned Edmund greatly. Manipulative relationships, financial irresponsibility despite her apparent success, and what the investigators termed, quote, a willingness to harm others for personal gain. Harm others how? Marcus, did you know that your sister has been investigated twice by her real estate firm for unethical practices? Did you know that she's currently in significant debt despite her apparent wealth? Did you know that 3 different people have filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau regarding her conduct? I didn't know any of this, but as Whitmore spoke, pieces started falling into place. Vanessa's expensive lifestyle never quite matched her income. Her ability to always land on her feet no matter what. The way she seemed to view every relationship as a transaction. The investigators also noted her treatment of family members, Whitmore continued quietly, including a recent pattern of interference in your personal relationships. My blood ran cold. How recent? Marcus, your grandfather's final report was completed just 2 weeks before his death. The investigators had been monitoring both of your lives continuously. They were aware that your sister had begun pursuing your girlfriend. The room seemed to spin. He knew? Before it happened? The final report predicted it would happen. Your grandfather was so concerned that he added a codicil to his will, specifically addressing what he called Vanessa's inevitable betrayal of family trust. I stared at him, trying to process this information. My grandfather, a man I'd never met, had somehow predicted that my sister would steal my girlfriend, and he'd structured his will accordingly. What does the codicil say? Whitmore's voice became very formal. It states that should Vanessa Thompson cause significant emotional harm to her brother through romantic interference, her inheritance waiting period will be extended to 10 years with additional character assessment requirements. You mean because she took Rebecca, she has to wait even longer? That's correct. And Marcus, there's something else you need to know. The codicil also states that you have the power to reduce or eliminate her waiting period entirely, should you choose to do so. Your grandfather wanted you to have that control. I sat back in the leather chair, overwhelmed. In the span of 1 week, I'd lost my girlfriend to my sister and inherited a fortune that came with the power to determine my sister's financial future. What happens now? I asked. Now, you decide how you want to handle your new life, Whitmore said. But Marcus, your grandfather left you one final message. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in the same careful handwriting I'd seen on the letter. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Marcus, if you're reading this, then Vanessa has done exactly what I expected her to do. I'm sorry you had to experience that betrayal, but I hope you understand that some people reveal their true character only when they think they have nothing to lose. Your sister believes she has won something valuable by taking what belonged to you. She has no idea that in doing so, she has lost something worth far more. Use this gift wisely, but remember, the greatest revenge is not punishment, but becoming the person your enemies could never dream of being. Your loving grandfather, Edmund. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. Outside the window, Seattle stretched out below us, a city full of possibilities I'd never imagined. Mr. Whitmore, I said finally, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Of course. Does my sister know about any of this, the inheritance, the investigations, any of it? She has no idea. As far as Vanessa knows, Edmund Carver died a poor, bitter old man who cut off his family decades ago. I thought about Rebecca, probably planning her future with my successful sister, both of them thinking they'd made the smart choice. Both of them thought they knew exactly what they were getting. How long do I have to decide what to do? There's no rush, Marcus. This is your inheritance now. You can take as much time as you need to decide how you want to live your new life. I stood up and shook his hand. Thank you, Mr. Whitmore. I'll be in touch. As I walked back to my car, I realized that everything had changed. Not just my bank account or my future prospects, but my entire understanding of who I was and where I came from. I wasn't the disappointing younger brother anymore. I wasn't the guy who got left behind while others moved on to bigger and better things. I was Edmund Carver's grandson, and it was time to start acting like it. 6 months passed before I made my move. During that time, I did exactly what my grandfather's letter had suggested. I became the person my enemies could never dream of being. But I did it quietly, methodically, and completely under the radar. First, I quit Henderson and Associates, not with fanfare or dramatic speeches, just a simple 2-week notice. I told them I'd received a job offer in Seattle that I couldn't refuse, which, in a way, was true. I was now the CEO of Carver Industries, a position that came with my inheritance. I moved to a modest apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Nothing flashy, nothing that would attract attention. To anyone who asked, including my parents, I was working as a financial analyst for a small investment firm. The cover story Harold Whitmore's team had crafted was perfect, boring enough that no one asked follow-up questions. While I was learning to manage a business empire worth billions, Vanessa and Rebecca were living their best life back in Portland. At least, that's what it looked like from the outside. Through social media, I watched their relationship unfold, like a carefully curated performance. Instagram posts from expensive restaurants, weekend trips to wine country, Rebecca wearing jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. Vanessa had pulled out all the stops to impress her new girlfriend, and Rebecca seemed absolutely enchanted by this lifestyle upgrade. What they didn't know was that Vanessa was drowning in debt to maintain this facade. The investigators Edmund had hired were still providing reports, now directly to me. Vanessa had maxed out 6 credit cards, taken out a second mortgage on her apartment, and was 3 months behind on her BMW payments. Her real estate commissions were being garnished for unpaid taxes, and her firm was conducting a formal investigation into her business practices. But Rebecca didn't know any of this. She saw the penthouse, the car, the expensive dinners, and assumed she'd traded up from a struggling accountant to a successful businesswoman. She had no idea she'd actually jumped from a billionaire to someone on the verge of bankruptcy. The irony was delicious, but I wasn't ready to reveal it yet. I had bigger plans. Using my new resources, I quietly began investing in Portland's real estate market. Not residential properties. That was Vanessa's territory, and I wanted to avoid any direct competition that might tip her off. Instead, I focused on commercial properties, particularly in the Pearl District where Vanessa's firm, Platinum Realty, was located. It took 4 months, but eventually I owned the building that housed Platinum Realty's offices. I also used my connections. Edmund's business network was vast and influential to start my own real estate development company, Pacific Northwest Holdings. Nothing tied it to my name publicly. It was structured through a complex web of LLCs and trusts that Harold's team had set up. Then I waited for the perfect opportunity. It came on a rainy Thursday in October. Vanessa's firm was facing a major crisis. Their biggest client, a hotel chain looking to expand throughout Oregon, was threatening to take their business elsewhere due to concerns about agent conduct. The concerns, according to my sources, were specifically about Vanessa's aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. But Platinum Realty was desperate to keep this client. They represented nearly 30% of the firm's annual revenue. The managing partner, David Chen, was scrambling to find a solution. That's when Pacific Northwest Holdings made an offer. Through intermediaries, my company approached the hotel chain with a proposal. We would handle their Oregon expansion exclusively, providing not just real estate services but also development and property management. It was a comprehensive package that Platinum Realty couldn't match, and the price point was aggressively competitive. The hotel chain jumped at the offer. Within a week, Platinum Realty had lost their biggest client. Within 2 weeks, David Chen was conducting a formal review of all agents, starting with those who had generated complaints. Within a month, Vanessa Thompson was out of a job. But I wasn't done. While Vanessa was scrambling to find new employment, difficult to do with her reputation in Portland's tight-knit real estate community, Rebecca was beginning to notice that their expensive lifestyle was suddenly becoming unsustainable. The fancy dinners stopped. The weekend trips ended. The jewelry purchases ceased. Rebecca, being Rebecca, started asking questions. That's when she discovered the credit card debt, the mortgage problems, the garnished wages. That's when she realized that the successful woman she'd left me for was actually financially ruining herself to maintain an illusion. According to my sources, I may have hired a few investigators of my own. Their first serious fight happened on a Tuesday night in November. Rebecca accused Vanessa of lying about her financial situation. Vanessa accused Rebecca of being a gold digger who only cared about money. Both accusations were true. By December, cracks were showing. Rebecca had started working extra hours at her marketing job, trying to cover expenses that Vanessa could no longer afford. Vanessa had moved out of her penthouse and into a studio apartment in Beaverton. The BMW had been repossessed. Rebecca was beginning to realize she'd made a terrible mistake. That's when I decided it was time for the final act. I arranged to be in Portland for the holidays, ostensibly to visit my parents. In reality, I wanted to see how the situation was developing firsthand. I stayed at the Heathman Hotel downtown, a property I now owned, though no one knew that. On December 23rd, I was having coffee at a cafe in the Pearl District when I saw them, Rebecca and Vanessa, walking down the street, clearly in the middle of an argument. Rebecca looked frustrated and tired. Vanessa looked desperate and defensive. They didn't see me, but I heard enough of their conversation to understand that this was probably one of their last fights. Rebecca was talking about needing space to think. Vanessa was pleading with her not to give up on their relationship. 2 days later, on Christmas Day, Rebecca called me. "Marcus? I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear from me, but could we maybe talk sometime? I think I made a huge mistake." I let her wait 3 days before responding. We met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in Southeast Portland, far from anywhere Vanessa might accidentally encounter us. Rebecca looked different than she had 9 months earlier. Older, maybe. Definitely more tired. The confident woman who had left me for greener pastures now seemed uncertain and fragile. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said as we sat down. "I was curious what you had to say." She took a deep breath. "I want to apologize for how I handled things, for how I ended our relationship, for everything. I know I hurt you, and I know saying sorry doesn't fix that." "You're right, it doesn't. I also want you to know that I've realized what a mistake I made. Leaving you, getting involved with Vanessa, it was all wrong. I was blinded by things that don't actually matter." I sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. "The thing is, Marcus, I've learned a lot about what's really important over these past few months." And what's really important is being with someone who's genuine, someone who's honest, someone who cares about you for the right reasons. And you think that's me? I know it is. And I was hoping maybe we could try again, start over. I know it's a lot to ask, but... Rebecca, I interrupted gently, can I ask you something? Of course. What made you realize all this? What specifically made you understand that you'd made a mistake? She hesitated, and I could see her wrestling with how honest she was. Well, it became clear that Vanessa's situation wasn't as stable as it had seemed. You mean you found out she was broke? Rebecca's cheeks flushed. It wasn't just about money, Marcus. It was about the lying, the deception, the way she'd misrepresented her entire life. But mostly the money. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. This was the moment I'd been planning for months. The moment when I could reveal the truth and watch her realize exactly how badly she'd miscalculated. But looking at her now, seeing the genuine regret in her eyes, I realized something unexpected. I didn't want her back. Not because I was angry, though I had been, and not because I wanted revenge, though I'd certainly planned it. I didn't want her back because I had genuinely moved on. The man sitting in this coffee shop wasn't the same person she'd left 9 months ago. That person had been insecure, eager to please, willing to accept whatever scraps of affection were thrown his way. The person I'd become didn't need Rebecca's validation or approval. I didn't need her to choose me to prove my worth. Rebecca, I said finally, I appreciate the apology. I really do. And I'm glad you've learned something from this experience. Her face lit up with hope. But I'm not interested in getting back together. The hope faded quickly. Oh, is there someone else? No, there's no one else. But there's also no us. What we had, it's over. It's been over since the night you told me about Vanessa. But I thought, since I'm apologizing, since I realized my mistakes. Rebecca, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose what you thought would make you happier, and that's fine. It just didn't work out the way you expected. She stared at her coffee cup. So that's it? We can't even try. That's it. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Rebecca asked the question I'd been waiting for. Can I ask what you've been doing these past few months? You seem different. I smiled. I've been learning who I really am when I'm not trying to be what someone else wants me to be. That's very philosophical. It's very true. As we got up to leave, Rebecca made one last attempt. Marcus, what if I told you that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life? What if I told you that I've spent every day for the past 3 months regretting it? I looked at her one final time, this woman who had once meant everything to me, who had broken my heart and inadvertently set me free. Then I'd say you're learning an important lesson about the consequences of our choices, and I'd hope that lesson helps you make better decisions in the future. I walked out of that coffee shop and never looked back. 3 weeks later, Vanessa called me for the first time since the Rebecca situation had started. She was crying. Marcus, I don't know what to do. Everything's falling apart. I lost my job. Rebecca left me. I'm about to lose my apartment. I know things have been weird between us, but you're my brother. Can we talk? We met the next day at a diner near her new studio apartment in Beaverton. She looked terrible. Thin, exhausted, defeated. This wasn't the confident, successful woman who had stolen my girlfriend. This was someone who had bet everything on a facade and lost. I know you probably hate me, she said before I could speak. What I did with Rebecca was unforgivable. I betrayed you. I ruined our relationship, and for what? It's all gone now anyway. Why did you do it, Vanessa? She was quiet for a long time. Honestly, because I could. Because I'd always been able to take whatever I wanted. And it had always worked out. I saw something you had that looked good, and I just took it. I didn't think about how it would hurt you. I didn't think about anything except what I wanted. And now? Now I realize that some things aren't worth taking, and some things, once you break them, can't be fixed. I studied my sister's face. She looked genuinely remorseful, genuinely broken. This wasn't the same person who had callously stolen my girlfriend and expected me to just accept it. Vanessa, what if I told you that you could fix this? Not us necessarily, but your situation. What if I told you there was a way out of your financial problems? Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I pulled out Harold Whitmore's business card and slid it across the table. Call this number. Tell them you're Edmund Carver's granddaughter and that Marcus Thompson sent you. They'll explain everything. She stared at the card. Who's Edmund Carver? Our grandfather, Mom's father, the one she said died poor and bitter. Marcus, what are you talking about? He did die poor and bitter. That's why Mom never talked about him. I smiled. Vanessa, our grandfather was worth $2.3 billion when he died, and he left both of us an inheritance. Her mouth fell open. The catch is, your inheritance comes with conditions. Conditions that, until recently, you hadn't met. But I think you might be ready to meet them now. I don't understand. Call Harold Whitmore. He'll explain everything. But Vanessa, I want you to understand something first. This isn't about the money. This is about becoming the kind of person who deserves it. The kind of person grandfather wanted us to be. Why are you telling me this? After everything I did? I stood up and put $20 on the table for the check. Because despite everything, you're still my sister. And because I think you finally learned what it feels like to lose everything. Maybe now you'll understand what it's worth to have something real. As I walked away, I heard her calling my name, but I didn't turn around. She had Harold's number. She had the opportunity to change her life. What she did with it was up to her. 6 months later, I received a handwritten letter delivered to my Seattle office. The return address was from a small town in Oregon I'd never heard of. Marcus, Harold explained everything. About grandfather, about the inheritance, about the conditions. I'm writing this from a cabin I'm renting while I work as a counselor at a rehabilitation center for people recovering from addiction. It's honest work helping people who've made mistakes like I did. Harold says I need to prove I've changed, and I'm trying to do that. Not for the money, but because you were right. I needed to become someone who deserves a second chance. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to try. Your sister, Vanessa. I kept that letter in my desk drawer. 3 years later, Harold called to tell me that the trustees had approved Vanessa's inheritance. She'd met all the conditions Edmund had set forth, and then some. She used the money to expand the rehabilitation center where she worked, turning it into one of the most respected treatment facilities in the Pacific Northwest. She never moved back to Portland, never returned to real estate, never tried to recapture the life she'd lost. As for Rebecca, I heard through mutual friends that she eventually married a financial advisor from Beaverton, someone stable, reliable, and moderately successful. Someone who would give her the comfortable middle-class life she'd always wanted without the drama or the risk. And me? I built my grandfather's empire into something even bigger than he'd imagined. Carver Industries became a major player in sustainable technology, renewable energy, and affordable housing development. I used the wealth Edmund had left me to create opportunities for others, to build something that mattered. But more importantly, I learned the lesson my grandfather had tried to teach me through his final letter. The greatest revenge isn't punishment. It's becoming so successful, so content, so genuinely happy with your life, that your enemy's actions become irrelevant. Sometimes people think they've won when they take something from you. What they don't realize is that they've actually given you the greatest gift possible, the motivation to discover who you really are when everything else is stripped away. My sister thought she'd won when she took Rebecca. She had no idea she'd actually freed me to become the person I was always meant to be. And that, as it turned out, was worth far more than anything she could have ever taken from me. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.